A Fox News alert breaking this morning. Police in Manchester are arresting 3 more people in connection with the bombing at Monday night's Ariana Grande concert. That means 4 people now in custody, including the terrorist's 23-year-old brother.
Yeah, evidently when he was arrested, he was smirking. 22 people killed, including children. Dozens more were injured. And as we learned yesterday, many were struggling for their lives.
The threat level in Great Britain has been raised to critical. The Prime Minister there says that the possibility of an attack would be imminent. She also ordered 5,000 military members to go out and disperse amongst the country.
Military members.
Absolutely. Interestingly enough, when you go to Great Britain, one of the things, if you're in London, you want to watch the changing of the guard. The changing of the guard has been canceled today because they've taken those police members who normally take care of securing the area, and they've redeployed them throughout London. So things are afoot. And the Home Secretary says it seems likely that this man did not act alone. They're worried about another terror cell.
All right, let's bring in Michelle Malkin now. You know, she's host of Michelle Malkin Investigates on CRTV.com. And Michelle, we've talked to you so many times before after a terror attack. Now we're seeing there's a difference now that they're already sensing between how the president's responding to attack to one of our allies and how President Obama did.
Yeah, I think that there is a huge difference in how Donald Trump very immediately, with moral clarity, responded. Over the years, I spent many hours sick to my stomach with the Obama, John Kerry stance of almost apathy and the same attitude that you're now seeing from the jihad coddling London mayor there, which is, well, this is just the cost of doing business and
Michelle,
living in Western civilizational now.
Sorry to interrupt you, but it's always nice when you can see an example of this. And we have some sound bites of President Obama and his response to terror versus President Trump. So let's watch this and we'll get your response.
Still learning all the facts. This is an open investigation. We've reached no definitive judgment on the precise motivations of the killer.
I won't call them monsters because they would like that term. They would think that's a great name.
I've directed that we must spare no effort to determine what, if any, inspiration or association this killer may have had with terrorist groups. What is clear is that he was a person filled with hatred.
I will call them from now on losers because that's what they are. They're losers. And we'll have more of them. But they're losers. Just remember that.
All right, Michelle, what's your response?
There you go. Moral clarity versus moral ambiguity. I will never forget that President Obama, before he was a president, his response to 9/11 was that the reason for Islamic terrorism was that they lacked empathy and they grew up in a climate of poverty. I mean, the cluelessness here. Let's just take the jihadis in Britain alone. 2/3 of them came from middle-class families. Osama bin Laden was a millionaire, if not a billionaire. So many of these jihadis did not suffer from lack of exposure to the West. They were educated by the West. They were Western doctors. Look at Afia Siddiqui, who was one of the jihadis here in America, educated at MIT. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who was a mechanical engineer who earned a degree at Chowan University in Tennessee. These people do not lack educations. We do not need a midnight basketball social justice approach to terrorism, and that is the main difference that we've seen in the Obama administration and the Trump administration.
Well, we are learning about this particular suicide bomber, 22-year-old Salman Abedi. This guy was a dropout. He dropped out of college. His parents were from Libya. It sounds like he just got back from Libya in the last week. And apparently MI5 knew about him, but he was not on an active list, it sounds like. An active investigation, but apparently they also deemed him not a high risk. It sounds like in this particular case, they dropped the ball. I mean, if the guy gets off the plane from Libya this week and nobody's keeping an eye on him, that's a problem.
Yeah, that's right. Patrick Poole, who's one of the best terror bloggers and terror analysts in this country, if not the planet, coined the phrase "known wolf," and both Britain and Europe and America have been infiltrated by them. My heart went out to Katie Hopkins, who was on your show earlier, because she expressed the outrage and the frustration that many people in Britain and of course many people in America have had, that we have people who have been blind, deaf, and dumb to jihad and have allowed these people to come and walk in our open doors, the front doors, not just the back doors and the side doors. And to paraphrase the historian Arnold Toynbee, of course, civilizations die from suicide, not by murder. They do it to themselves.
Meanwhile, Katie Hopkins was with us earlier. She spoke from the heart from Britain. She's fed up. She's fed up with the response. She's fed up with politicians. She's tired of being a target. Listen.
I do think I speak for people who recognise that we're making choices in this country. We chose to let a jihadi back in, and we chose, therefore, for our little girls to be slaughtered. We choose to protect the human rights of jihadis, 3,000 of whom are roaming those streets because their human rights matter more. We're defending that over our small babies. And I think many mothers like me, many fathers, many normal people perhaps, just feel that we've had enough now. We've had enough. We're tired of buying into the narrative that we're strong and the jihadis are weak. No, we've been knocked down, we've been trampled on, and I think the general population is fed up with being treated so awfully. We want jihadists out of this country or locked up. They cannot have rights over our sons and daughters.
Well, she went on to say, you watched the interview, you said, she's talking to her 3 kids at the breakfast table, and the conversations that we have with our kids now at such a young age to explain what was happening at this concert. What are you telling your children?
Well, my kids are now 16 and 13, and as long as they've been able to comprehend evil in this world, I've let them know what they have to face and deal with. My daughter was just a toddler when 2001 happened. She was old enough to remember when Saddam Hussein was captured, and we don't whitewash it for them, and I think that is so important. And it's the only way that you're going to inoculate kids from the same kind of woolly-headed, moral equivalence thinking that helped get us into this mess in the first place. And it's this self-censorship that Katie Hopkins also talked about, the inability to define and to pinpoint the roots of Islamic violence and Islamic imperialism that have dominated. I mean, when you have these refugees who are welcomed into your country and you fail at the basic goal and the basic requirement of assimilation in the country, this is what you end up with.
Sure. Something else that Katie Hopkins talked a little bit about was how she was receiving email from some of her readers talking about how after this, now they're afraid to go out to dinner, afraid to go to concerts and stuff like that. Justin Bieber apparently has got a scheduled concert in London, I believe, in July. His fans are calling for him, we don't know that we can be protected there. Justin, please cancel your dates in the United Kingdom. And then you've got Katy Perry, Michelle Malkin, who is a contemporary of Ariana Grande. She was on the radio yesterday, and she's got an idea on how we should go ahead and do something about terror around the world. Listen to this and then some of your analysis.
The greatest thing we can do is just unite and love on each other, and no barriers, no borders. We all need to just coexist.
True.
I just got to slow that down. Just got to love each other.
Unite, love, no barriers, no borders. Speaking from her heart, how
and
effective
coexist.
How effective is that?
This is a good strategy. I'm going to pass this on.
Let's start and see if she's going to drop all of her bodyguards and turn off her security systems in her own home. I think that the next time we welcome Muslim refugees from Syria or Yemen into this country, that we should send them to her house. And it is just more of that sort of limousine Gulf Stream liberal mindset of these celebrities who just do not operate in any sense of reality. I mean, there are people around the world now who are struggling to exist because they have to fight against Islamic imperialists who don't think that they should exist at all, merely because they don't believe and accept in Islam and refuse to be subjugated. The second point I want to make about people like Justin Bieber and these celebrities is, at the same time that they they preach these platitudes. These are people who are making a lot of money by going to tour in places like the Middle East, where gays are thrown off buildings, and women are subjected to forced marriages, and young girls have to be subjected to female genital mutilation. We don't hear from feminist Katy Perry about all of the brutal practices that are accepted by Islamic imperialists and that have been imported into this country.
Well, we just got to coexist. I'll tell you, everyone's got their own theory. Hey, Michelle, thanks so much.
Thanks, Michelle. Katy Perry needs to remember these terrorists don't want to coexist.
Oh, they don't want to coexist.
Write that one down, Brian. All right, Jillian.
Good morning, guys.
Good
we
morning.
actually have an update on some news we've been following all morning long. Breaking right now, ISIS fighters beheading a police chief and taking more than a dozen hostages at a church in the Philippines. The terrorists threatening to kill worshipers and a priest if the government doesn't recall their decision to impose martial law to combat ISIS in the region. Extremists now storming the city, burning down buildings. Gunfire still raging at this hour, leaving 2 soldiers dead. The Oklahoma police officer acquitted of manslaughter after shooting and killing an unarmed black man is back to work. Officer Betty Shelby now working a desk job at the Tulsa Police Department days after being cleared by a jury. Shelby killed Terrence Crutcher last year, claiming she feared for her life when she thought he was reaching inside his stalled SUV for a gun. He wasn't armed, but an autopsy showed PCP in his system. And President Trump unveiling his new budget proposal aiming to cut the national deficit. The $4.1 trillion blueprint slashes public programs like food stamps and Medicaid. Budget Director Mick Mulvaney says it's part of a whole new approach to spending.
No longer going to measure compassion by the number of programs or the number of people on those programs, but by the number of people we help get off of those programs.
The budget also allocates $2.6 billion for border security. Mulvaney saying the border wall is one of the president's priorities. So look at your headlines on this Wednesday. I'll see you guys in a little bit.
I like when he was talking about government waste. He said, well, when it comes to the EPA, why are you cutting so much? He goes, well, do we really need a global warming musical? And there was money put aside for a global warming musical.
You don't want to see that?
You're right, Steve. I'm in the minority when it comes to that.
He's a great pitch person, though,
He's
for the
fantastic.
president. The way he was able yesterday to explain every single question to the administration's point of view was spectacular.
You know why? I think he wrote it.
I think he did too. But he had an extensive answer for it.
Right, and by the way, it's great when your OMB director is really good at math. I prefer that, as opposed to social studies, which is also valuable.
Write that down.
Good at math.
Okay.
All right.
Well, we got a Fox News alert after a whirlwind visit to the Eternal City of Rome. As you can see, the first family has boarded Air Force One. This is videotape playback from just a few moments ago. The President of the United States, a final receiving line, or a so long line, as he says, Arrivederci Roma, as John Roberts reminded us, as he leaves for Brussels, which is about a 2-hour flight. You'll see the departure and the arrival, of course, here on the channel.
And his beautiful wife, Melania. It's been so fun to see all the changes of her outfits. Yeah. She's so beautiful and so elegant. And she went to a hospital, a children's hospital, a Catholic children's hospital there in Rome to visit with the children and to be with them as they're probably facing some of their darkest days. So I thought that was sweet.
All right. Air Force One, as soon as it starts lumbering down the runway, we will show it to you because it's always so cool. And in fact, it's starting to move right now. So we'll go ahead and split the screen. Actually, joining us right now, we got Lee Carter, the president and partner at Meslansky and Partners. You've been looking at some of the president's sound bites over the last couple of days, and you put them to the dial test where you've got a focus group of 1,000 people or so, and they look at it and they do the dial based on their political affiliation.
That's right.
All right. The first soundbite is the one that everybody's talking about, where the president talks about, don't call them monsters, call them, losers.
So many young, beautiful, innocent people living and enjoying their lives murdered by evil losers in life. I won't call them monsters because they would like that term. They would think that's a great name. I will call them from now on losers because that's what they are. They're losers.
You can't even see the red line.
You can't. It was so high. Republicans and Trump supporters absolutely love this. They gave it an A. Independents a B. Democrats a C. Now, I was really surprised when I saw these results come in early this morning because so much of the coverage has been this was totally the wrong thing for him to say. This is unpresidential. And yet the respondents that we spoke to said, you know what? Actually, he shouldn't dignify them with any kind of a name that they could be proud of, and losers is a name that they can't be proud of. There were some Dems who criticized and said, you know what, he speaks like a second grader, I'm a little tired of it. But for the most part, that's a pretty good grade among the Dems, and I think that he has had a really solid week from his speech in Saudi Arabia to his visit to Israel. Now, here in Italy, people are really talking about him differently than we've heard in the last few weeks.
Yeah, we've also been told that that's how they recruit some of these individuals. These are individuals that are maybe losers among their crowds, and ISIS promises a better life for them and that they will be popular and that they will have a better life in the afterlife. But let's go on to talk about something else that the president said on this world tour. He was in Saudi Arabia, and he was basically saying, I'm not here to tell you how to run your government. I am here to support you, and we can come together and find common ground. He said, we're not here to be the world's police. Listen to this and watch the dials.
America is prepared to stand with you in pursuit of shared interests and common security. But the nations of the Middle East cannot wait for American power to crush this enemy for them. The nations of the Middle East will have to decide what kind of future they want for themselves, for their country, and frankly, for their families and for their children. It's a choice between two futures, and it is a choice America cannot make for you.
The red line and the independents, both off the screen.
Off the charts. This was an A+ for both independents and Republicans, and a really big deal for him because we've seen recently he's lost some of the support of independents. They really love this message. Democrats even gave it a C, and I think people were overall saying, I'm really pleased to hear that we're going to play a supporting role here, that we're going to be the world's police, that this is going to be, he's going to deliver on his promise of America first, but we're going to be out there supporting this fight however we can. And so this was a really solid message, a really great visit for the president overseas.
One final soundbite, and this was yesterday. You saw it live on the channel. He was in Jerusalem, and he was talking about Israel's right to exist, and he's not going to let, when he's president of the United States, anybody try to wipe them off the face of the globe. Watch this.
ISIS targets Jewish neighborhoods, synagogues, and storefronts. And Iran's leaders routinely call for Israel's destruction. Not with Donald J. Trump.
And the dials?
And you can see there, Republicans and independents, they gave this an A. Democrats gave it a C-, but only once he said not according to Donald J. Trump. You saw that dial dip as soon as he said his own name. But overall, I think that we're seeing that people want to see the support of Israel. And I think, again, everywhere he went, really solid performance. The speech in Saudi Arabia this weekend, people were saying completely changed their view of him as a statesman. And I think this was a great trip.
We'll continue to follow him on this world tour. You can see him there, take off, heading to Brussels for NATO.
That's right. They have two identical 747s. So we don't know if the president was on that one or is going to be on the next one that takes off. We believe he was on the first one, but you just never know.
For security purposes, they don't tell you?
You don't really know unless you watch very carefully. And there he goes down the big runway at Leonardo da Vinci Airport.
Not DiCaprio.
I started to say DiCaprio. You know, he's a great actor. He does not have an airport.
Not yet, at least.
All right. Thank you very much.
He plays one on TV, though. Yes.
All right, thanks, Lee.
A new report suggesting that President Obama's administration might have been breaking its own rules, using the NSA to spy on everyday Americans for years. Senator Rand Paul is going to join us live to react to the breaking news. That's next.
Well, the President of the United States is picking up stakes. He's going to be getting out of town, and he's heading over to Brussels to meet with 25 other prestigious leaders.
Went to Saudi Arabia, Jerusalem, Bethlehem, the Vatican, Rome, and now to Brussels.
That's right. He has had a very busy morning. If you're just getting up overnight, he actually met the Pope. And in fact, Our president just tweeted this out within the last couple of minutes. Honor of a lifetime to meet His Holiness Pope Francis. I leave the Vatican more determined than ever to pursue peace in our world.
And when the president picked up and left, he got out of the chaos, some of which he caused himself that he left behind. And joining us now is Senator Rand Paul. He's with the Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee member. But, Senator, just out of your expertise for a second, just from your observation, how's the president done so far? How do you think he's being viewed?
You know, I think it's been a good first trip. I think that trying to unify those in the Middle East to know that it is largely their responsibility to wipe out Islamic terrorism over there, I think is a good sign. Now, I'm not a real big fan of selling so many weapons to Saudi Arabia because, unfortunately, some of those weapons in the past few years have wound up in the hands of ISIS because Saudi Arabia really has been indiscriminate in who they've armed. So I am a little concerned about giving so many weapons and selling so many weapons to Saudi Arabia.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of concern, something you've been worried about, and you've spoken about this extensively, is how the government spies on us. And in fact, there's a circus story. I'm going to just read the first paragraph of it for you in just a second. As soon I did it this way. I did it the hard way. The NSA under former President Barack Obama routinely violated American privacy protections while scouring through overseas intercepts and failed to disclose the extent of the problems until the final days before Donald Trump was elected president last fall, according to once top secret documents that chronicle some of the most serious constitutional abuses to date by the U.S. intel community.
This dates back to 2011.
And here's another headline report. Obama-era NSA admits to years of illegal searches on Americans.
Yeah, see, I've been concerned about this for a long time and realize this is not just a few people. You think it's only people that are calling a foreign leader or a foreign person that are being picked up? If you mention a foreign person in your conversation or in your email, so if anybody mentions the name Assad in an email, it's being gathered up. And so it isn't just communications with Assad, it's communications about Assad. So we're talking about millions and millions of phone calls and emails that are being gathered up and then being searched with no sort of control over the privacy of the American.
Sure.
We call this a backdoor way to sort of get at Americans' privacy without using a warrant, and I think it's a terrible program.
Senator, explain, if you will, for people who just over their coffee, their jaws just dropped. So if you're talking on the telephone and you mention Assad or you mention some other one of the words that is in the matrix that they're searching for, there's then a red flashing light on that phone call?
Yeah, and realize it's not the old-fashioned wiretap where they've tapped your phone. There's a huge cable going transatlantic, or there's a way station where they're being transmitted by satellite. Everything's being sucked up. So if you can imagine millions of things going through the internet across the sea or across the continent to another continent, millions and millions of internet transmissions all being soaked up based on a keyword. So Americans get caught up in that. And I would say 99.9% of Americans are innocent. I'm all for going after people, even Americans, if you have evidence and you present it to a judge, but we shouldn't suck up everybody's phone calls and everybody's internet transmission. And the danger is, and one of the accusations of Susan Rice and others, is that they were looking at this information politically, searching opponents and going after people in the Trump transition to try to bring them down.
And maybe even you, when you were a candidate. So I want to bring you to this. I know how you guys like to do ask questions. Even if these guys can't answer it, you try to make your point in these hearings with the question. And I think I picked up that with Trey Gowdy yesterday in this question to John Brennan. He asked him flat out, in your last days, not the one that's in the prompter now, but the other one, in your last days, what did you do in terms of unmasking? Listen to this and tell me if you know what he's getting at.
Have you ever requested that a U.S. person's name be unmasked?
Yes, I have.
Do you recall any U.S. ambassadors asking that names be unmasked?
I don't know. Maybe it's ringing a vague bell, but I could not answer with any confidence.
Do you remember what your last day on the job was at the CIA? What was the date?
It was noon on January 20th when I gave up my responsibilities as director of CIA.
On either January 19th or up till noon on January the 20th, did you make any unmasking request?
I do not believe I did.
What's he getting at, Senator?
Well, see, I think the concern is, and I don't have enough information to tell you one way or another, but my assumption would be that they do know somebody was being unmasked in the last couple of days, and that there was this sort of frantic, commotion with the Obama administration trying to get at as many things as they could on the way out. If this becomes, if we can determine this to be true, this is an amazing abuse of power, and it dwarfs any of the other sort of made-up stuff that we're looking into now. If the Obama administration was going after and targeting people of the Trump transition or others politically, this is an enormous story, and it will dwarf all the other stories.
Senator, I know Trey Gowdy, to the point we know Trey Gowdy, and he's as straight as an arrow and a great prosecutor. He wouldn't have asked that question unless he knew something.
My guess is they know some ambassador was asking, and they wanted to know if it was Brennan doing the work for them. But see, there's going to be dozens of other people, and unfortunately, there may be hundreds of people. And what a lot of people don't realize is that most of the information comes in initially. If it's coming into the NSA or the FBI, it is already unmasked. It only gets masked when it's sent to other people. So there are hundreds and hundreds of people. So for example, who unmasked Flynn? Maybe it was before it even got masked. Maybe it was, and that was a domestic conversation, so probably that was the FBI listening. Do you have some people in the FBI who were loyal to the Obama administration or enemies of Trump who decided then to call up Susan Rice and say, hey, maybe you need to unmask this particular transmission because we think Flynn was talking to the Russian, foreign minister. So there's a lot of problems here with having so much power to listen to conversations, and that power can be abused. There's got to be amazing oversight on it, and some of these phone calls, frankly, we just shouldn't be listening to.
No kidding. All right.
Senator Rand Paul, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
ISIS releasing videos like one called How to Make a Bomb in the Kitchen of Your Mom just before the Manchester terror attacks. Our next guest lost both legs fighting terrorism in Afghanistan, but says the most critical battlefield is online. Retired Marine Staff Sergeant Johnny Joey Jones is next.
Back with the Fox News Alert now. Brand new pictures of a police raid in Manchester going on. 3 more people under arrest at this hour in connection to the massacre at the Ariana Grande concert the other night. Meantime, British police seen removing a known Know Your Chemicals manual after carrying out another raid in a residential area. Do you believe this? This on the heels of ISIS posting videos of how to make a bomb in the kitchen of your mom, which has been out for years. So are we doing enough to counter the terrorist powerful online influence? Joining us right now is U.S. Marine Corps veteran Staff Sergeant Johnny Joey Jones, who lost both legs in a blast in Afghanistan, and that is one of your areas of expertise. First off, when you see the follow-up arrest, I guess it doesn't surprise you.
No, not at all. And good morning, Brian. At the end of the day, when you hear suicide bomber, you automatically think there was a bomb maker somewhere, because that's intellectual property the bad guys don't want to give up. In Lone Wolf, true Lone Wolf incidents is not quite as the same, but having ISIS claim responsibility and understanding the information we're getting about the planning of this tragedy, you kind of assume right away when you hear suicide bomber, there's probably a bomb maker or a group of bomb makers somewhere who put that man into motion.
So if the reports are true that he was carrying a bag, it might make one think that maybe he was supposed to drop that bag and get out of there and live. Does it change your calculus on what exactly was supposed to happen that night?
Well, I can't speak completely to ISIS. It's been a few years since I lost my legs in combat, but I'll tell you, in Afghanistan, Iraq, for over 10 years, we saw when there was a possible suicide bomber or someone put in position to place a bomb, a lot of the times they would have some sort of fail-safe. They would either have a cell phone signal they could call and make the bomb go off if that person decided not to do it or decided to do something different. So the notion that some of these people they've arrested were actually at the place the bomb was set off to make sure it happened, that's a possibility too. The idea is you have a cell of terrorists working in an area, and each of those cell members may have different communications with ISIS, all for the purpose of making sure a bomb goes off in a place like this.
So, Staff Sergeant, how do we get better at detecting these things online and stopping them from proliferating?
I think our human intelligence is our number one asset. I think that most government officials will tell you that. I think it's been our most effective asset. In Afghanistan, we literally had to stop the flow of fertilizer into the country, and even still couldn't, rid the country of IEDs. The idea that we can stop or mitigate the types of chemicals used to make homemade bombs, I mean, I can make a bomb out of sand. So at the end of the day, making bombs is not something we're going to be able to mitigate completely. What we can do are track components, project boards, things you order off the internet that don't have a lot of other purposes. We can also follow our human intelligence and follow things that lead us to these bad guys. And most importantly, when we know someone's a bad guy, let's look into them. Let's apprehend them. Let's talk to them. Let's find out who their closest friends are. And let's not, hide under some guys that, a known terrorist or a known bad guy, but he wasn't that bad, but he hasn't been that bad. I don't understand that. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me when these innocent lives are at risk. Doesn't mean infringe upon people's freedoms, but it certainly means follow the leads you do have.
Look, there's certain nations, I think we've heard this before, that need extra scrutiny. That's what the president tried to get across, and the courts are govern them up for some liberal judges. And if your passport says Syria, then stamp Libya en route to the UK, I think you owe the people of the United Kingdom an extra look at who that person is. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, and a lot of children are dead. Staff Sergeant Johnny Joey Jones, thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
All right, 12 minutes before the top of the hour. Up next, will President Trump's tough talk on terror be the difference America needs to defeat ISIS for good? Chris Paranto, who fought heroically in Benghazi and more, is up next. But first, let's check in with Bill Hammer for what's coming up at the top of his show.
Yeah, good morning to you. This meeting in Brussels takes on a greater sense of urgency given the mass murder brought in Manchester. We will see President Trump at NATO this morning, waiting on that. We're getting more details from our reporters on the ground about the killer in England. We'll bring that to you. We know the Russia matter here at home is moving forward. Trey Gowdy on what he learned from the hearing yesterday. Also, we'll ask the White House about the loser comment when Sebastian Gorka joins us live in 10 minutes. We will see you then. Top of the hour in America's Newsroom.
Drive them out of your communities. Drive them out of your holy land. And drive them out of this earth.
Iran will never have a nuclear weapon, that I can tell you. I won't call them monsters. I will call them, from now on, losers.
There are some big differences between President Trump's Middle East trip and President Obama's. The biggest one, President Trump's refusal to apologize.
Joining us right now with his reaction is Benghazi contractor and U.S. Army vet and the author of a brand new book, The Ranger Way, our friend Chris Paranto, also known as Tonto. Good morning.
You say it so nice.
Thank you.
Almost better than Mr. Varney.
Thank you. So, Tonto, what do you make of this new president on his first trip abroad?
One word, strength. And that's one thing we were lacking over the last 8 years was the strength that we needed in our leadership. And the unity when he said Muslims and Christians need to come together and destroy terrorism. It wasn't Christians are the awful scum of the earth. We need to apologize for what America's doing. He's trying to make it that we are together in this and that terrorism is the problem.
Big difference.
Yes, huge.
Because President Obama went over and he was there to apologize. Yeah, listen to that. We have some clips from his apology tour and we'll talk about it.
I've come here to Cairo to seek a new beginning between the United States and Muslims around the world. The United States is still working through some of our own darker periods in our history.
So we went over there not only to apologize, but to also talk about our dark days and tell the rest of the world.
Yeah, and that's a huge mistake because the United States leads in everything within the world, including we are the 911. As much as Mr. Panetta at that time when the Benghazi was going on was saying we aren't the 911 of the world, we are because we are the strongest country in the world financially and military. And I think Donald Trump is President Trump's putting that back out there to the world for them to see, and it was great. It was great to see. It was very refreshing.
Because you feel that this president, who's less than 130 days into his new term, is taking the gloves off. I mean, this is the president who authorized the generals to do whatever they wanted to, and they dropped the mother of all bombs.
Right. And they're using the special operations forces again to go in there after the attack in Manchester, did a raid with the SEALs, and that's awesome. Hit them hard. If you're going to hit America, then guess what? We're going to hit you hard and make it terrible. You're not going to want to hit us anymore because we're going to go out there and destroy you.
Is that the Ranger Way? Your new book is called The Ranger Way.
It's a little bit more friendly than that. It's about actually the Ranger Way, and most Rangers will tell you this. Is that we learn from failures. We fail so many times. You learn how to pick yourself back up. That's the strength that people need in America. The perseverance that the kids lose nowadays. That's what the Ranger Way is about overcoming.
But Tonto, it's also about the training, because as an Army Ranger, you get training unlike any other.
And it's quite miserable most of the time, but you learn to deal with that misery. And there's a Tontoism, a saying I always say: embrace the suck. You embrace it. Things get miserable. You hug onto that, you deal with it, and you become better for it. And that's what the book's about. And it can be applied to everybody, not just Rangers and SEALs and so forth. It's just everyday life.
Can be applied to the president, can be applied to the families that have lost loved ones in this terrorist attack.
And it's awful to see that. And, and you get a little desensitized when you're overseas for so long. I saw children die before. And so I know what terrorists are capable of. So when I see this, it's just another reason that we need to go in there and just destroy them, eliminate terrorism.
Well, if you're looking for a great book to take to the beach this summer, check out The Ranger Way. It just came out this week. Chris Parente, always a pleasure.
Thanks, guys. Thanks again for having me again. You guys are awesome, Steve.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
We have more Fox and Friends just moments away. Stay with us.